Good evening, and welcome to the meeting of the Standing Committee on Strategies and Public Policies. We have a presentation to get things rolling from our horizon. Mylène Chivary presenting. Good evening, Madame Chivary. You have the floor. Good evening, honorable councillors, distinguished guests. Good evening. I'm here to talk to you about an ecology project that would place stickers on gas pumps. My name is Mylène Chivary, and one of a number of teens who is really concerned with climate change and the world that we are leaving for my generation and future ones. You might have heard of Our Horizon. I heard about it from a friend of a friend who had launched this kind of project in her community of West Vancouver. I wanted to find out more on this intriguing project. I did some research and I was intrigued by the simplicity and the impact that this project could have. I hope it will serve to inspire you as well. iHorizon proposes to put warning labels on gas pumps. These labels were presented by Robert Turkey, who is a founder of Our Horizon. He talks about recent studies that show that over the last 800 years, the 800,000 years, we'd had 180 to 300 ppms of carbon dioxide, and today it's 400 parts per million. Or scientists did study to determine how many fossil fuels can be burnt before it becomes too dangerous for the environment, and they have determined that it was 565 gigatons of CO2, and that increased the temperature of the atmosphere by 2 degrees Celsius, and they determined how many fossil fuels remain in the earth, and they calculated that it was 2,795 gigatons of CO2, which would increase the temperature of the air by 526 degrees Celsius, 5 degrees Celsius. But I don't want to bore you with all these figures and statistics, but I'd rather not spend so much time on the problem, but rather on the solution. Now, I just want to say that global warming is a real problem, and we have to act now before it's too late. And now the warning labels, they show information on climate change, and we could modify them to meet our needs. Of course, here they would have to be bilingual. Here's an example on the species at risk, for example, or on the acidification of oceans, or on asthma in children. Here you see a gas pump. The label is placed on the nozzle talker, which is it's a rubber piece that's added to the gas pump. Some gas pumps already have these nozzle talkers. Now, how can these labels help against climate change? These warning labels allow to counter 3 major problems. The first one would be a problem of lack of feedback. Let me explain. When you go to a gas pump and you put gas in your car, there is no immediate effect on the environment, but there's a delay between the cause and the effect, and therefore that makes us less inclined to act. I'll give you an example of this. If you put your hand on the stove, you feel the heat and you withdraw your hand immediately. You remove it. There's a direct cause action. But if we have a project that we have to hand in a week's time, we tend to procrastinate and wait till the very end, and we don't feel the effects until the very end. The same thing happens with climate change, except we have no time to procrastinate. But there is a solution. If we talk about climate change on a gas pump that talks about climate change, there creates a link between the cause and the effect. The consumer will see the effect that it can have on the environment and might change his habits. The second thing that this might do is the distribution of responsibility. When the responsibility is shared, or not shared, we are less inclined to act. For example, if somebody becomes unconscious in a public place, we find him and we start doing CPR, and I tell somebody else to call 911, but other people are not going to act because they assume that it's the responsibility of someone else. However, if I designate a specific person in the crowd, that person will have to act without delay because it becomes his responsibility to act. It's the same thing with climate change. Everybody drives one car thinking that my car isn't going to change the world, therefore they don't feel responsible. But when everybody starts thinking like that, it starts to make a big difference. By placing these labels on the gas pumps, we're placing the responsibility in the hand of each individual. And they become much more motivated to act if they feel individually responsible for the effects of climate change. It really localizes responsibility. And the last major problem that these labels can help are the externalization of it communicates the externalness. But let's say, the gas goes through a number of steps before getting to the pump. It comes out of the earth. It's been transported up to the gas station, and then this cost does not include all of the repairs and the damages caused by climate change. For example, these storms or coastal infrastructure that are damaged. Certain experts think that we should include those on the labels, but rather instead of increasing the price of gas to communicate this impact, we propose something that's more efficient. These labels show problems of the future if we continue to use this gas. And this affects our emotions in our brain. That affects us much more than if we just increase the price of gas by a few pennies. So that communicates all of the other impact. And of course, we can't forget to what extent the gas is inefficient as a resource. 80% of the energy produced by gas is not used by the car. It's immediately burnt off and emitted into the atmosphere, which means that only 20% of the gas put in your car is used to make it move forward. Furthermore, about 2% or 4% of that 20% is used to move the person inside the car, whereas 96% of that 20% is used to have the car move forward, which means that a little less than 1% of the total gas from the beginning is used to move the person from point A to point B. That's a real waste of a resource. I think it's important to mention that the goal of these labels is not to ask people to stop using their car overnight, but rather to incite them to look for more greener alternatives by changing their mentality and their attitudes toward gas and their habits that we do normally. Now, we haven't made much progress in terms of the efficiency of the fuel. In 1908, the Ford Model T would go 6 to 9 kilometers per liter. In 1950, an Oldsmobile went 9 kilometers per liter. And 2012, a Cadillac Escalade goes about 6 kilometers per liter. Now, with the technology available today, we should be able to put much more efficient cars, especially when compared to these that you see here. The best car on the world can go 5,385 kilometers per liter, and next to it is a school that was built by high school students. It would go 930 kilometers per liter. They're a little slower than the first two, but these type of cars are at the extreme. We could find a happy median between these two extremes. Now, you're probably wondering if these labels can truly incite people to change their behavior. Well, the good news is that we do have evidence that they can. Yes, they can lead to a change of behavior. A number of studies done on the efficiency of labeling on cigarette packages show that these labels have changed the behavior and the actions taken by people. Here you can see a map of the world. It shows over 60 countries that followed Canada's initiative of putting warning labels on cigarette packages. And here you have a map of the world that shows the number of countries where people called Our Horizon by email or by Twitter, showing an interest in the project. The time has come back to Canada to show leadership and to initiate the placement of labels on gas pumps. These labels are a very cost-efficient solution. They would only cost a couple cents each if they're produced in great numbers, and the nozzle talkers, that red part that we saw on one of the earlier slides, is probably about $15 each. That would be about $100 per gas station if they don't already have the nozzle talkers. It's very reasonably priced and easily absorbed by the gas supplier, especially compared to other suggestions to counter climate change, which might cost millions of dollars. This one is a very reasonably priced alternative. And I'm very lucky to be in Dieppe, actually, because you can see that the municipality is very concerned with the environment and has taken initiatives to preserve it. In the master plan, you see a whole network of trails and biking trails to promote the active living. Since then, the municipality has added kilometers to its trail network and bike trails, and the buses of the public bus system have bike racks to allow a combination of bike use and buses. Furthermore, every year the municipality offers one free day of bus rides to allow people to become familiar with the buses. These labels would be a continuation of these initiatives already taken by Dieppe. It would motivate people to use their trails, the bike trails, and public transit. Now let's say a few words on what you can do to help this project see the light of day. We would ask you to adopt a bylaw. First of all, we're talking about the town of Hudson. In 1991, it was the first community to have banned pesticides in its boundaries. Then the movement spread to the rest of Canada. They showed leadership, and it gave results. A reporter who had concluded, "Where's the next Hudson?" talking about our horizon. Now, all municipalities do not have the ability to adopt these kind of bylaws, and so they might be afraid of the lawsuits of gas suppliers. But in January of this year, the West Vancouver Municipal Council adopted a resolution that they agree with the idea of placing warning labels on all pump handles, and they think that this project should be implemented. So what we're asking you to do is to support the West Vancouver's resolution. And it's much less risky for you, and it doesn't cost anything because you are not placing the labels. You're just indicating that it's a good idea without implementing it yourselves. The objective here is to convince the greatest number of municipalities possible of this idea, and when it comes time to vote on the placement of these labels on the pumps, it will be much easier because a number of municipalities would already be in an agreement. So show leadership and be one of the first municipalities in Canada to adopt this resolution. In closing, I hope I've been able to inspire you the way I was inspired. Thank you. Thank you, Madame Chevary. Before moving on to questions, I'd like to say I'm sorry that I forgot to tell people here in the room that if you need simultaneous translation services, there are headsets at the back of the room.
I forgot to tell you before the beginning, but if any wants it, they can go at the back to get them. Maintenant, j'ai une question.
I have a question from Councillor Dallaire.
Merci, Monsieur le maire adjoint. Premièrement, félicitations.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, congratulations on your initiative. I think it's great to see that you really hold the community close to your heart and you're presenting this initiative. You've answered my question already, essentially. In your presentation, you were talking about legislating and how to get around that aspect, but you answered that question. And Your Worship, if you allow me, I would like to suggest that the presentation be also made to the Environment Committee, and they would be able to suggest to us how to proceed. Yes, as a matter of fact, there's going to be a meeting this week on Thursday night of the Environment Advisory Committee. So, as well as your presentation, I'd like to have your document that we can distribute to the members of the committee to encourage them to take action. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Gaudette. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. That shows great conviction, and it takes passion to take on these causes, to have them move forward. Thank you so much for talking to us about this one. Now, some years ago, we had a committee that looked at communities. Who's going to help me out here? What was it called? Luc? Oh, the flowers, the communities, flowering communities, and communities in bloom. And it was this type of initiative as well. At the same time, I'd like to challenge the Environment Committee and the Committee for the Francisation and the gas pumps. Other than the co-op, all of the gas pumps in all of our gas stations have English-only labels, or pretty well, almost all of them. So I challenge these two committees, the Environment Committee and the Francisation Committee. I would challenge them to take up the challenge. I would, in that that these gas stations, in all of their cautions and in all of the labels they should have everything in French and in English on the pumps and on the on all of their devices. Thank you. And I'm sure that the Environment Committee and the Francisation Committee will take up the challenge. I'm sure of it. Thank you. Are there any other comments, questions? If not, thank you very much for your presentation. And it was really apropos in terms of the timing. So if you'd like to leave your document, if we can have it, if you could leave it with Madame Duguay, so that she makes sure that. Yes, I also have a copy of the West Vancouver resolution. Thank you. Thank you so much. And the next item on the agenda, it's a presentation from Really Local Harvest. And we're talking about green things here, about green products. So our farmers here in the Southeast, the Really Local Harvest. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, staff. I'm very pleased to be here this evening. If you're not familiar with the Récolte Chez Nous, it's a co-op of about 30 producers here in southeast New Brunswick. We're all proud partners of Dieppe and the market of Dieppe. And this evening I'm here to present our feasibility study that we conducted in order to see how feasible it was to expand the Dieppe market. And this evening I'd like to get your support to continue in this study. And that would be the pre-feasibility stage, and now we'd have to go into more detail. So we have a board of directors at Récolte Chez Nous, but we also have an advisory committee made up for this project. It's made up of producers and François Lavigne, and representatives from Nature's Root and the Michaud Farm. We have representatives from the market. Mr. Gilles Boucher, for example. Our representative from the consumers is Mr. Richard Long, who's also a citizen of Dieppe. And Mr. Saint-Jules is here as representative of the city of Dieppe. And Paul-Émile Ducette, the manager of the market. The Dieppe market is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. It's still a young market. It's a healthy market. It's still full of life and vigor. But its youth causes it to have some growing pains.
Merci beaucoup.
Yeah. I'm used to a handheld mic. I'm not used to a stand mic. So the market is still young. It's been here for 10 years and it still faces some challenges, but it does have some opportunities in order to keep going in the future to maximize the economic impact it has and to be able to have the biggest impact possible throughout the region. So this is the project we're working on currently. When we talk about the Dieppe market, of course, we're talking about local products mostly. I think that's the first thing people notice when they go to the market is to buy local products. Local products from local producers as well as from artisans and tradesperson. It's the first calling card of the market. As it developed over the years, this market, like other markets across North America, have become a destination. It's something unique that happens every Saturday morning here in Dieppe, and it's difficult to reproduce any other time, and it's really special. It's a meeting between different generations. You can see young families with their young children, and you see seniors there, you see university students, and so on. It's also a multicultural place, both for the clients who come to buy, as well as for the persons who have stands. We could see people from India, from Korea, from China, and so on. It's also an instrument for the recruitment and the retention of citizens. It's an incubator for businesses as well. There's several people have started at the market to test their product and then went and set up shop elsewhere, but they keep their relationship here with the market. It's the market is very important for the whole agricultural industry. It's a great place for direct sales. Producers can come directly to the market to get the best return on their product. People come to their market to pick up a fresh agricultural produce, so the producers have a place of choice to sell their product. It's really one of the gems of the downtown. It's this downtown that is in the full growth period. It's also very young, it's growing, and it's also the starting point, a Saturday morning. Like the first thing you do on a Saturday morning is go do your shopping before you go do anything else, before you go on your adventures, you go to the market. And I think that the quality of the market here is due to the great diversity of products available, be it wines from the Magnetic Hill Winery, or the Olivier Savonnerie soap, or the different foods. I've traveled throughout Canada, and in the last few years I've been to the Calgary market, the Jean Talon market in Montreal, the Halifax market, and they have nothing over us. I think our market is as good quality as anywhere else. 5,000 or 6,000 people go through the doors of the market every morning, which has for sales of $8.2 million per year, according to our estimates.
When I look at this picture, I see the opportunities. I mean, people like the market. They like to go there just for this going there. And at the same time, I mean, we can see what the challenges are. Traffic flow. It's sometimes not easy to move around because of the many numbers of people there. Merchants would like to have more room. They know that with more room, they could increase their sales. The idea of having more space for more merchants, more diversity, and also more space for social activities to move around a little bit more comfortably and to discuss. I think it's a weekly habit of some people who go there to meet other people, to socialize. And often when we go to the market and we talk with others, well, sometimes we stop in the middle of the lanes and it stops circulation. So those are some of the challenges. So we hired Millier Dickinson Blay, and they worked on feasibility assessment project, how we can improve the market to meet the challenges of the future. So she gave us a scenario how to enhance the role of the economic development of the market and to enforce its influence on the sentiment of belonging of the citizens. That's part of what we'd like to do. So in the Millier Dickinson Blay report, there are 5 recommendations for expansion of the Dieppe market. So it would be the increase of the square footage inside and outside of the market, in order to have permanent merchants that will be open during the week, maybe have 2 or 3 of them. So we see this model in the new Halifax market. We see it in the Jean Talon market in Montreal and elsewhere also. We also recommendation of having a commercial kitchen for the development of products, experimental cooking, transformation of stuff that merchants could be used. There could be community training, how to canning or bottling, for example. There could be mentoring projects in the cooking department. The 4th recommendation would be to have a microbrewery. That's one of the suggestions. One of the commercial spaces that could be rented. We recognize the potential role of microbreweries in the development of downtowns to bring vibrancy downtown. It's something that's typically Canadian, and it's a trend that is very strong, and it shares the values of local products in the culinary kind of aspect. And the 5th recommendation would be to have a space for offices, but that would probably be secondary and depending on the square footage. So I see that it's been moved around on the slide. So these recommendations would contribute to the enhancements of the Saturday market. It would be the creation of new business opportunities for the merchants, and it would contribute to the continued development of the Dieppe downtown. So here we see a couple of renditions that are hot off the press. We've just received them today, and we can see that the older section of the market. This is the view from Acadie Boulevard, and on the right it's more Acadie and Gauvin. So we can see on the left section it would be businesses that would be permanent and open during the week, and on the right hand side it would be the Saturday market. That's one of the views from Acadie Street. We can see here that there would be more room, more public room on the outside, which would create more possibilities over the week and during the weekend. So where are we at in this project? Well, we're in the process of, yesterday's storm was not too tough, so we were able to come here tonight. So if you agree and we go forward, March and April would be to continue to see if there is interest, try to find some partners for financing, see if we can find something. Spring 2015 would be the time to review the concept and to debate it, what could be done, see how things could be functional on the inside. There we'd need a new financial plan, and we would expect to work to be able to present the final plan in September 2015. So that is the presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mathieu. Questions from members of council? Mr. Bellevaux. Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Dastou, have you able? It's an increase the square footage. Where are we at? Square footage. I think that we're looking at an increase of approximately 8 to 10,000 square feet. That represent what? Right now, I'm trying to remember.
Monsieur le maire. Bonsoir. Le
Good evening. Right now, the market has 15,000 square feet. So, in other words, a third more. Thank you. Madame Dallaire.
Merci pour la présentation. Puis vous avez raison, quand on
Thank you for the presentation. And you're right. When we compare to other markets in other municipalities, we have nothing to envy them. For the research for the city of Dieppe, what would it mean more studies? We wanted to come here tonight to inform you of the project. We're not asking for any type of commitment right now, but it's just to see if you're in agreement that the project merits to be merits. It's more depth in its study. That would give us the opportunity to keep going forward with this. Okay, thank you, Worship. Arms in support. Councillor Godet. I'm really happy to see that, how am I going to say this? That we are thinking of progress for our market. Maybe a comment. I hear often people trying to set up behind the market, between the market and the market street, and I don't see any proposals in the drawings that you're proposing. But the difficulty there is usually the wind and the cold, and I was specifically told often that if we could find a fairly economical way to find protection from wind and from the cold at the back, there would be merchants who would be satisfied with those spaces, and spaces that don't need any specific infrastructure. There are already a couple of merchants, food merchants and sculptures, arts and crafts who are there. But I would encourage you, depending on how the project is going to go forward, the setting up of things in the back for protection against the elements, and it's something I would suggest very seriously. It was even suggested to put kind of garage doors that could be opened when it's nice in winter, for example, and they could be closed when there's inclement weather or during the winter. So I leave you with that challenge. Like I said, we wouldn't need any additional infrastructure, but there would still be possibility to settle or to set up a couple of merchants there and in a more comfortable way. Yeah, we've been evaluating for a couple of years, and I think it's something that could be incorporated. Yeah, it would be possible to incorporate something like that. We had already talked about horizontal moving garage doors. So it's maybe spaces that could be rented later on in the year. But it's true that some mornings in spring and it's still very cold. So yeah, because the way I see it right now, something that would be fairly small, and there wouldn't. Yeah, these two projects would be totally separate. Yeah, but I think it would still be possible to integrate one. I think it was mentioned at the last board meeting that it would be a good opportunity to go forward with that project too. I think that what Councillor Godet is trying to say is that there are things that could be done now with a very limited cost that could help accommodate merchants. And I spent 4 years in Montreal, and at the Atwater Market, they have outdoors spots that they use a year long, and they have winters that are similar to ours. Well, maybe excepting this winter over the last 8 weeks. But generally speaking, it's not that difficult and it's not that expensive, and it accommodates a lot, and it breaks the wind, and there's possibility to have additional space. And these little additions in Atwater and in Jean Talon in Montreal are not heated. So, okay, so I think that there is interest on the part of council. I think we've heard it here tonight, just as you had heard it during the Dieppe expansion meeting a couple of weeks ago. So keep on trucking. Thank you. Next presentation on wage equity. Maybe we'll have to lower the podium just slightly.
Ou tout au moins baisser le micro, oui, effectivement. Oh. Bonsoir, Madame Savoie. Bienvenue.
Bonsoir.
Good evening, Madame Savoie. So, Your Worship, councillors, these are the results of an analysis in pay equity, on pay equity. So, in October 2010, the City of Dieppe accepted to take part in a pilot project launched by the New-Brunswick government to determine if there existed pay inequities in the working environment, in the working place. So the objective of the analysis was to compare the value of work, especially or traditionally done by women, to the value of the work, mostly or traditionally done by men. So the definition and the ultimate objective of pay equity is equal wage for a work of equal value. So if there's a difference in value, it basically goes for their equal wage for equal work. So the wage gap is the difference between the average wage for men and the average wage for women. So the wage gap, there are factors and there are beliefs, social factors. One of the factors is the balance between work and family obligations for women at work, the wage bands, and the under-evaluation of work traditionally done by women. So a reminder, the objective is to compare the value of work, mostly or traditionally done by women, with the value mostly or traditionally done by men. So the evaluation of jobs, which is basically the process, the objective is to determine the relative value of jobs within the municipality by analyzing systematically and in a detailed fashion and of an evaluation of the job. So a job evaluation does not measure and does not reflect the performance or the gender of a person or its competencies, capabilities to do the work. Historically speaking, in Dieppe, for the job evaluations, there's a modified Aiken system that was adopted by the City of Dieppe for all the unionized staff. following negotiations with CUPE in 2006. This system has 11 sub-factors, and we've evaluated 38 jobs. The wage bands were integrated in the collective agreement of 2011-2016, and right now there are 38 categorized positions in 10 wage bands. Evaluations of non-unionized jobs. It's an evaluation plan, which is a HAY modified system adopted in 2007. There are 10 sub-factors, and there are right now 40 positions that are evaluated in this HAY system. Wage bands were approved in October 2010 by Council. The implementation of the re-evaluation of positions and of wage bands for job categories. Right now there are 40 positions in 12 job categories. So the exercise for wage equity by programs, we went to Quebec for the program, the computer program. So the idea was to determine the job categories and their gender predominances, determine the value of job categories, and to estimate the wage gaps. The job categories with gender predominances were determined with 4 criteria: the gender predominance of at the level of 60% for representation, the stereotype, jobs generally associated to women or to men in their traditional roles in society. The third criteria is the historical, the category of jobs in the business that is being done by men or by women over a significant period. And finally, the percentage, where the women represent 55% of the staff of the category, but only represent 5% of the total staff, then it's considered as feminine gender predominance. The value of a job is analyzed by these sub-factors, and in all the job evaluations, the 2 that we kept for Dieppe, union and non-unions, we have the same 11 sub-factors. They can have different names, but they're basically the same factors, the same definitions for each job. So you have the 11 factors here. There's knowledge, sometimes it's called education, experience, decision-making, concentration, physical requirements, dexterity, action impact, safety of others, supervision of others, work relations, and work environment. We can name them differently, but these are the 4 factors, the 11 factors that are being used. Some factors are put together, so that means that there would be 10, but if we look really at the specific definitions, then we really can find all of them. Estimates of wage gaps, according to the method that's being used, which is the individual method, the estimate is done by calculating the wage gap between the global wage of job categories with feminine predominance and those with different categories with male predominance. So these would have to be equivalencies. In other words, that's where the value of the positions is estimated by the 2 tools that we just mentioned. The results for the predominances here in the city of Dieppe, we have 49 positions total of male predominance and 29 of predominance in women. And so we're very happy with the results that basically we have wage equity in the whole of the city of Dieppe, in all union and non-union positions in the city of Dieppe. Do you have any questions?
Cette étude est
Of members of council on this study? I think that in the details you have copies, members of council have copies of the work that was done with the results.
L'étude nous a amené. Madame Dallaire.
Madame Dallaire, thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to thank staff for having launched the study. It's been a long road, especially that the work had been started with job evaluations in the past, but the last step had not been done, measuring the man and women predominance. There was pay equity, and that's what the study showed. I had a question for clarification purposes. I read the report, but I'm not sure I understand really well. Maybe you could clarify it. How to measure with the job categories? I think there were 12 or 10, union, non-union. Are these the categories that were judged as predominance of women or predominance of men, or was it individual jobs that were categorized, and how were they categorized? The report uses the word category as a position. So in other words, we're talking about positions. But maybe you're referring to this, or we have pay bands. So we said in one of the screenshots, yeah, that's what I was mentioning, the wage bands. Were these the ones that were at predominance of women or predominance of men? Because usually it's not by job categories that we compare these, or are there different methods to do this? For all practical purposes, for the city of Dieppe, all categories of jobs, they're really one position. If there are different positions who have different staff who have the same job, we're talking about categories, but it's the same position. I don't know if it's related, but for example, for positions non-union, we have 40 positions that are evaluated in 12 job categories. So it's true that it's not clear. These categories refer to the wage bands. So there are two things here. The report uses the word category as position. A category is a position. Two categories is two positions. But on the screen, I wanted to explain pay bands that we call job categories. So we regroup different positions that have a value of maybe a gap of 5 or 10 points. They're still in the same wage band. So we call those job categories when we talk about wage bands. But the categories really refer to positions. I know that I had the opportunity to see preliminary reports before this step, and I know that this was in a computer program with positions on one line and all this. Is this information that could be added to complete the report, or it wasn't retained in the evaluation?
C'est la même, c'est juste que ces graphiques-là.
No, it's the same thing, but these graphics come out of the program, but it's not something that would find itself in the report. And because of the method that we used, it seems that it doesn't carry much weight, so we didn't try to reproduce them, because we don't, I mean, we can guess at, but we don't know what kind of calculation was set up in the program to establish those graphs. The program presented a lot of challenges. I have to admit that we fought with it quite strongly. So it's not easy to explain, and it didn't really represent the results clearly. So we did not put them into the report, either by fear of mistakes showing up. But as I read the report, I had the impression that something was missing, something that was missing that would explain the process and that would reach the conclusion that there is no inequity. There are figures, but maybe I didn't see it. The figures are there, but, well, it's that at page 15 of the report. I don't know if it's numbered in the same way. because we had an analysis for union positions and an analysis for non-union. At page 9, you have the result of the evaluation for the non-union positions, and you see in the table the numbers of job categories on the right, and then categories of jobs that are the positions, and then the predominance, the value of the category, the hourly rate, and then you see the wage gap on the right. With that is it. Yeah, well, I would say that there's something missing, because my next intervention would be that I would have liked the report to have been shared with the Committee of Equality between Men and Women of the municipality. It's an initiative that came up following a recommendation to council by that committee. And just to come all the way around, maybe to have a paragraph or two towards the end to show what the to talk about the tables. That's the report that is comes out of the program. So it does not have that much flexibility. Yeah, but it would be up to staff maybe to come up with conclusions, so that it would be easier for us to basically to interpret and to understand. Well, yeah, it's true. Often people will not recognize the factors of value that are contained in a category. So yeah, it would be a question of going through categories, and we'd be able to judge. It would maybe make things easier. Yeah, at one point does it go from one value to another, from one category to another one? You mean for all the wage bands? With the union was negotiated with the union for the gaps, and with the non-union it was done at the beginning of that band, with the gap that is seen naturally between the value of the group. So there are what we call natural categories. So, but with the union jobs, it's on negotiations. So they have their own experts in the matter. One of our former staff. Maybe one last intervention I would suggest. Natural evolution, it should come up to the committee so that the committee can get to know it, and then it could come to a public reunion and then it could be adopted. Yeah, that would be the normal process. Thank you, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. I want to thank you for the presentation of this study. When I saw the conclusion, I was very surprised, because usually in a report like this one, we find some faults, and here there are none. So I think it would be a good idea to congratulate the administration of the municipality for having managed the municipality very well concerning this equity. And the second thing I wanted to ask was the same thing as Madame Dallaire, that it be presented to our committee, the advisory committee on equality between men and women. There's some members of the committee who said they were going to be here, but I guess there were regrets.
Oh, that's what happened. Yeah, we'll have to do it some other time. We'll blame the chair of the committee. That's why you did it, right? Okay. Councillor Thibodeau, thank you. Councillor Béliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. A very detailed work. Congratulations for the work you've done. Now, after having seen this, even with the report per se, I still had trouble relating the desire to see if there were any wage gaps or problems in specific categories that are dominated by women or men. because the positions were already assessed and they were assigned to certain pay bands. So I didn't really see whether or not a pay band was not applied correctly. I don't think that's the case, because the whole exercise was very comprehensive. I think it must have been painfully detailed. But to see certain details that explain the complexity of certain positions, but I started off with the idea that there would not be a wage gap based on the fact that there were more women than men if these positions were analyzed and then they found factors to qualify these positions, such as knowledge and so on, whereas another one might not need as much education but still needs knowledge to do the job. It was done, and similar to Councillor Dallaire's and Thibodeau's comments, it would be nice to pass this along to the committee and to see if it fits or if it doesn't, and I'm sure it will fit. Good job.
Peut-être ajouter, c'est que nos évaluations dans
Our job assessments were conducted well before the exercise to determine if there was wage equity or not. The Hay method was used for the non-unionized job, and the Aitken system was used for union jobs, and that's recognized across North America as the tools to use. And so we researched these tools in depth before we adopted them, and I think that both Dieppe and CUPE all agreed on the tool used, because the tools do the job. They truly assess the complexity of the different positions without looking at gender, without looking at whether they're predominantly men or predominantly women. So basically, I mean, well, these were done a long time ago, but without looking at wage equity per se. It's after that we use the filter to determine if there was pay equity. If there had been flaws in the assessment tool, we would have had a good indication then. We would have had results that would be very different from what they are. It would have shown up. Yes, absolutely, and that's the test. A last question, Your Worship. Would it add value to the exercise if we ask that somebody from outside look at it to see if they really come up with the same conclusions? I think there might be people here in the province that are very involved in wage equity. And would this be something to consider? I'm just putting it out there as a possibility, if you wanted to do that. Your Worship. Thank you, Madame Dallaire. Thank you, Your Worship. We're very lucky here at the Equal Opportunity for Men and Women Committee here at Dieppe. The CEO for the Coalition for Pay Equity sits on that committee. So we're well equipped to do the assessment internally just from the committee. Thank you. Thank you once again. Congratulations for the work you've done, both in terms of the human resources of the municipality, but also with true cooperation from the union in this case. Thank you. Now, the master plan, Parks and Trails, which is the next item on the agenda. Mr. Johnson, if you don't mind waiting. We're trying to catch up on some of the storms of recent times. Jason. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. This evening, I'm going to give you the highlights of the master plan for Parks and Trails. This master plan was developed with the cooperation of BDA Landscape Architect Consultants in 2014, and it's almost finished. The principles of the master plan will be adopted in the next few weeks here at Council. We're going to present principles for the adoption over the next few weeks or months. And I wanted to mention that the master plan stems from the steering plan of 2011. It was really one of the recommendations of the 2011 plan was to have this master plan in 2015. So we're very pleased with it. First of all, the vision. The vision of the recreation sector is that all citizens of Dieppe have access to a neighborhood park or a trail within 10 minutes walk away or 800 meters. That's our vision. The objectives of the plan would be to review the existing parks and trails, to review the categories of parks and green spaces, to identify future needs, and to present recommendations for future development. We have set categories. 7 categories were developed, were identified in this master plan, and we'll go into a little more detail for each of these categories. The first category, neighborhood park. What are we looking for these neighborhood parks? We would consider 1 to 1.5 hectares, 1 to 3 acres. So the Yvonne Park, for example, that was built last year, and the Domaine du Faisan, Parc du Domaine Le Faisan, which is another example of a neighborhood park that we want to replicate in the future. Just to give you an idea of the size of what could be contained in a neighborhood park. These parks are walk-to parks. A neighborhood park is really for the people who live in that immediate neighborhood. That's what we're looking for in terms of neighborhood parks. And these parks can also include a green space for free games and a multifunctional space. And for example, the Parc Yvonne and the Parc du Domaine Le Faisan have these for free play areas and multifunctional spaces. Now, other than school parks and parks in urban settings, we are well served here in terms of neighborhood parks in Dieppe. You can see here on the northern part of the city, and here you see the southern part of the city. So almost everybody has a neighborhood park within 800 meters. And here we have these criteria that would determine the selection of a new neighborhood park. When we have a number of requests, for example, we get requests from neighborhoods, so we have criteria to determine. People ask us, is it my turn this year? So we've developed these 7 criteria that will allow us to better assess future parks, the next steps for those who want a neighborhood park. First of all, you have to look at the subdevelopment plan. Well, we look at the year that the subdevelopment plan was registered with the province. That's the first category, the first criteria. And we identify any lands for public purposes. Are there already lands for public purposes in this sector? Sometimes there is not. There is no LFPP. And then you look at the configuration, the setup of this LPP. If it's on a slope or in a marsh, well, unfortunately, those are challenges that are difficult to meet. Now we look at the development plan to see to what percent it is developed. For example, if a subdevelopment is already 60% built, we'll say, okay, well, now is the time to look at placing a neighborhood park in this area. We also look how close there is another playground. Are there other playgrounds that already serve this area or that are within 800 meters of this new proposed park? We do a demographic study. Every time we develop a new neighborhood park, we have to do a demographic study to see who lives there. Are there seniors? Are there young people? Are there teenagers, for example? A number of factors will help us determine whether or not we build a neighborhood park in a certain area. And the last but not least is the will of the citizens. Have we received petitions and requests to get a park? We also look at the requests we've received. So those are the 7 criteria that help guide our decision making for a new neighborhood park. Now, the second category are the community parks. These community parks are about 14 acres, 6 hectares or more. These are drive-to parks. The neighborhood parks are walk-to parks. And community parks really serve the whole city. These community parks might include parking, services, sports field. By services, I mean washrooms and so on. They might have all of these elements. These community parks have to be networked. They have to be in the network of the overall trail network. So the community parks have to be a part of the overall network of trails of the city. For examples, we have the Rotary Park, Saint-Anselme, and the Dover Park, which are examples of community parks. Here you see the community parks. We have 5 of them currently in Dieppe, and it shows you where they are. Now, I mentioned that community parks also have playground. For example, the Rotary Saint-Anselme Park has the Rita McNeil playground, which is probably one of the most used playgrounds of the city. So that's just an example to show that we are well served here. Now, green islands. These are more passive public spaces, monuments, heritage sites. These are included in this category. We mentioned the Parc Gilles-Laurie-Cormier and Roche-des-Mélançons. These are just 2 examples of these green islands. Now, buffer zones and green spaces. This includes conservation zones like the marsh, for example, waterways. Here we also include retaining ponds. And this is the category they would be in. An example of these buffer zones would be Bonaventure Park and the Doreen Aquatic Ponds, close to the aquatic center. That's an example of this kind of space. Now, these retaining ponds, the engineering elements are not considered as a part of the park, as an element of the park. For example, in the past, these ponds, the engineering structures were accounted for in the figures, but sometimes, like almost half of half of it were engineering structures. So in the future, from now on, we will no longer accept these engineering elements within the retaining ponds. Now, we have to, what can be included? Well, are there trails around the pond? Or the Yvonne Park, for example, there's a park there. That could be counted as for in the percentage given by the developer. So that's important. And we don't want to lose public spaces in this category. We're interested in the spaces that can be used by the public. And these retaining ponds are fairly limited. School parks. School parks include playgrounds, sports fields. There's a number of partnerships here in Dieppe, for example, at the school Mathieu Martin. They have soccer fields, football fields. So there are partnerships that exist with the municipality for the use of the fields. And I'd like to say a few words on the tripartite program for the development of school grounds. It's a program that's existed for a few years already. What we do, well, the schools put in a request or propose a project to improve their school grounds, not only the playgrounds, sometimes they've asked us to repaint the pavement, for example. These are things we can do. There's a limit of $15,000 that we can contribute to the program, but there have to be two other partners. Quite often it's the parents' committees that get together, or the province or the district, the school district. They make up the rest of the tripartite program for the $15,000. A number of schools have used this program in the last few years, and we have a request for Mamire School in 2015, and Anna Molenfant has put in a request for 2016. So I'm sure we will try and support them in their efforts. Now for the trails, Dieppe actually currently has 38 kilometers of trails, 38 kilometers of trails developed on the territory. There are 15 further kilometers planned for the future. What's really important for us, and this is something that we'll be adopting in the next few weeks, is the minimum width of 12 meters. We have challenges currently. When something is less than 12 meters wide, it's difficult to build a trail. People seem to think that 12 meters is very wide, but think that between two houses, 12 meters is not very wide if you want to add trees to screen the houses and so on. So what we'd like to do is to get the principle that a minimum of 12 meters width for trails on lands for public purposes is a minimum, starting from now. Now the trail map, rather. Here, these are the existing trails and the future possible trails as well. There's about 15 kilometers of them identified here. And the last category would be other lands for public purposes. These are the lands that do not fit in any other criteria, but do belong to and are maintained by the city of Dieppe. For example, the fire station. It belongs to us and we maintain it, but it's not for public purposes. And at the corner of Pascal and Champlain, I mean, we cut the grass there, but it doesn't fit in any of the other categories. So we've created their own category for these exceptions. Now, future development. We've looked at lands that are not yet developed. Within the Dieppe boundaries, and we've identified 3 community parks for 18 hectares in total. One of them with the new school. One could be attached to the new school. We've identified 7 neighborhood parks for a total of about 10.5 hectares. 15 kilometers of trails in the future would be another 18 hectares. And for other needs, other future needs, for conservation purposes, the marsh lands and so on, another 10 hectares that we need to identify for a total of 56.5 hectares, 74 acres needed for future development. Compared to what exists currently in our inventory, well, it's about the same amount. It's really balanced, what is already developed and what is needed in the future. Now, the principles to adopt, just to give you an idea of what we're going to ask you to vote on in the next few weeks. We're asking for this radius of 800 meters for all neighborhood park. We're talking about the selection criteria for the new neighborhood parks. We say that the retaining ponds are no longer considered as an element of a park, the engineering structures in these ponds. A minimum of 12 meters is necessary for all lands for public purposes. And last but not least, we prefer the acquisition of land rather than cash in lieu. So for us, it's always better to get land. We prefer the acquisition of land. When it's not possible, of course, then we'd have to go to the alternative, cash in lieu. And that wraps up my presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nadeau. Questions from councillors? Councillor Dallaire. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for all of the work that you have done on this issue. My question is this. You talked about a vision for parks. I was just wondering if it might not be useful to state the vision for the walking trails as well, including the criteria for their selection. I know there's an assessment to determine where they're going to be built each year, but it would be nice to have that on paper, just like you have done for the neighborhood parks, so that it's clear for the public how we choose, how we work. And my last comment is on the bike trails. Are we going to get another report on the bike trails, or will it be integrated into this document a little later? Well, we try to separate the trails that are on-road and the off-road. We have an active transportation plan that was developed some years ago, and but the bike trails and that are usually between the curbs on the roadway. So in 2015, we're going to review the active transportation plan. It's almost finished, but in terms of the engineering, yes, that's the intention. Within a month or so, we're going to review that plan, and it could be presented to council once it has been reviewed. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Thank you, Your Worship. I had a question. Have we ever assessed the parks that we already have currently, the neighborhood parks, and to determine their usefulness depending on the demographics? Perhaps they're not as useful as they once were. Have we ever considered transforming a children's playground to make it more relevant for a different demographics, or to change the equipment, or to move the equipment to somewhere else? Has that ever been looked at? Yeah. For example, the Errol Park. The citizens had asked us, had said, listen, there are no longer any young kids in this area, in this neighborhood. So following a few meetings with citizens, we concluded that, yeah, it's true, there are no longer any young kids. So we did our homework, we did a study of the demographics, and it showed that there were no longer any kids in that neighborhood. So we removed the equipment that was a little outdated anyhow. But so now it's just a green space with a couple of benches, and that's what the citizens wanted, and that's all they wanted in that park. So, but you had met with the community, yep. And each time a new park is proposed, of course, we do a study of the demographics to allow us to better target the people who are in that neighborhood. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure I agree with that idea completely, but we'll come back to it. Councillor Leblanc. Thank you, Mr. Nadeau, for your report. We can see that people are far more better served than they seem to think sometimes. The two things I noticed is these retaining basins that are no longer considered lands for public purposes because they're really not. They're engineering structures. But what I'd like to see is, well, what interests me is the fact that you say you prefer the land acquisition rather than cash in lieu, because all developments recently, well, we say we need a certain amount of land for a trail, but there's not enough land, so we'll give cash in lieu. You can still have a green space even if there's not enough room to build a park, and that's one thing I got out of this, is that I think cash in lieu should really be should never be used. If you develop a plan, a neighborhood plan, you can always include a green space somewhere. When you've done your subdevelopment plan, I mean, once it's built, you can't acquire more land. So I think there's always a place where you can find a small area for a green space in each subdevelopment plan. So I'd like to congratulate you for that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Leblanc. Mr. Beliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. When you talked about community parks, did you say there were 5 of them or 4? There are 5 community parks. If you talk about Place 1604, that's one of the community parks that we counted. Oh, okay. It just doesn't show up on the city map. Oh, it does, but it's tiny. Well, you can only scale it up so much, right? Yeah, that's one park that we really didn't know. We didn't know where to put it, what category, but I think, I mean, it offers services. There's a playground there. There's a green space, public green space. So for us, it's a community park. Your Worship, my next question is on the size of the Rotary Park Saint-Anselme. Could you tell us how many hectares it covers in total?
75 hectares.
75 hectares? That's what's indicated, 75? Okay, so the question is this. Will we consider a park of the size of Rotary Saint-Anselme? Because, as you know, Your Worship, it's a good park. It's well used. Should we not examine the possibility of having something similar to that one in size, even maybe change the type of park? I mean, but with those dimensions. I think there are spaces that have been identified, but it's not going to be easy to have the same thing as the Rotary in Saint-Anselme because of the trees. But in terms of space, when we look at the Dover Park, in terms of hectares, it's as big. It's not as big, but there possibility of making it bigger. If we look at Lake Bergen area, there's been some land purchases, so we're headed in the same direction there too. So I think it's going to. I think it was identified also in the community parks, the first category. Those spaces were recognized on the map. They were well identified on the map. Maybe not necessarily 75 hectares, but more and more now when the opportunities are there, I think it's a good policy for the municipality to acquire lands in strategic areas like those. And I'm convinced that Councillor Gaudette is, and I encourage him to mention it later when it's his term, but specifically concerning the Rotary Saint-Anselme Park, I was at the table when Councillor Gaudette was head of the Leisure Department. It's not always easy for members around the table of council. I think it's easier today, but it's not as easy. It's not that easy to have this vision of green spaces and how to develop them for our community. I can assure you there was no unanimity at the time. I mean, sometimes when you're 65, you don't think about those who are coming forward. I think people now, today, are much more open. But I tell you, it had to be with a lot of effort that the head of the department was able to convince the people so that the work could be continued. Your Worship, it's not the idea of wanting to copy the Rotary in Saint-Anselme, but it's when you look at the area, it's big. It was suggested to us maybe that a park or a preserve like this would be accepted if it were situated at that area, if the acquisition of lands was possible. Thank you. Councillor Gaudette. Before I get to my final intervention, if anybody wants to study how we get played with when establishing a park is an example. The administration sold a part of the public lands, and we were left with less than half of the area that should have been lands for public purposes at the time, and it was when there were quite a lot of youth in the region, so it's always been something difficult. Demography changes. The lands, for example, in the Beau Séjour subdivision became a place where all of a sudden there were very few children, and now it's changing again because houses get sold, and basically that's what happens. Concerning the new parks, obviously around the Dover Park, I think there would be possibilities, collaboration with the seniors club, the building that is there presently as an establishment. And as far as I'm concerned, that piece of land should run all the way to the river, and it should be connected to the trail. So that is a challenge that you will have to work at. There are lands that are still available, but not for long. So hurry up. My main problem with the data that you've given us, in the national and international data, what is the distance that is recommended for neighborhood parks? How far should users have to go? Well, our figures show 800 meters. this is what we see elsewhere. It's approximately that 10 minutes. We see 10 minutes or 800 meters. This is in urban planning principles. A trail of radius with a radius of 800 meters in a way. I'd like to see these data because I think things have changed. It used to be less than that. And when we mention 800 meters, for those who are more familiar with the miles and foot system, how many feet? It's approximately 2,600 feet. How many feet in a mile? 5,280. So it's a half a mile. You ask kids 5, 6 years old to walk alone a half a mile?
On n'encourage pas les gens.
Well, we don't encourage youth, the children 5, 6 years to go to the park alone. I think that the distance is a big distance. And there are topographical realities that we have to deal with. But if you said earlier that existing parks are fairly close to one another and get a good use, it wasn't 800 meters, so it wasn't the rule that was being used at the time. I think that 800 meters is way too long. 10 minutes, well, we could argue, but according to me, really, 800 meters is too long. I think it should be reviewed, and I'd really be interested in seeing the data from NRPA and other leisure associations, because it's not the data that I'm familiar with. Thank you for your comments. If there's nothing else, that puts an end to that item. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Nadeau. And we go now to another item which was not on the agenda that you have received, but because this is the public policies, there is no agenda really, so we did invite, and once again it's a question of playing catch up with the meetings because of the snowstorm. So we invited Bert Johnson to come to talk to us about his Bertrand Johnson, sorry. I think to talk to us about the challenge for the community networks for adult learning. That's it. Yes, a couple of minutes to talk to you about an activity that is related to learning that is going to occur soon. So not only is it an activity that's going to be pleasant, it's going to be fun, but it's also an important activity because it's going to bring help for a program that I would say is essential, is actually a priority for your community. I'm part of a committee that's called Adult Learning Southeast Incorporated. We take care of learning centers in 10 communities in Southeast New Brunswick. In our immediate region, we have a class in Moncton, a class in Dieppe. And I'm proud to say that the Dieppe class is full and is a fantastic success. At a certain age, I have to make notes. You're all aware of this. So, in our immediate region, Dieppe, Moncton, we also have centers in Chediac, Bouctouche, Saint-Antoine. We have 10 altogether. We hire 13 people, 11 of which are teachers. We also have computer instructor in his office at the Dieppe library, and we have an administrator. The arrangement that we have with the provincial government is that the government pays for the wages of the teachers, pays for all the course and the administration. We have the responsibility of finding the funds to pay for the locals. And I can tell you today in 2015, it's very difficult to find locals that are adequate and that are free. There are none anymore. So we've reached the point where the expense of the rent is a heavy burden. We're going to have to be, this year, we're going to have to pay approximately $60,000. So every year we have to have fundraising campaigns. And this year, the campaign will organize an activity in the month of April, which will be a roast of our Honorable Minister Roger Melanson from Dieppe, the MLA, and this activity will take part at the Community College on the 25th of April, which is a Saturday, and the tickets will cost $100 each. The people who have accepted to do the roast for the activity are, first of all, there's Dominique Leblanc, there's Camille Thériault, who is the CEO of Caisse Populaire. We also have Claude Williams. Apparently, he has important advice to give to our minister, Roger. And I learned last night that our premier, Brian Gallant, apparently would like to participate. Furthermore, we have the opportunity, and I don't think I'm mistaken, to have our MC, the mayor, Yvon Lapierre, will be our MC. It will begin at 5:30 at night with the welcome, followed by a good meal, and following by the roast. So this is the announcement that I had for you tonight, because we've received help already from some of your councillors who are part of our committee. So that's my announcement tonight, and tickets, you see them there. Jean-Claude has tickets, Jean-Marc has tickets. These are the two councillors who are giving us a hand with the project. So it's an important project, and I'm here tonight to announce it and to ask for your help, for your support. It's a very good cause. Thank you very much. I believe that I know that it was discussed already around the table, the council table, and certain also coffee mugs over the last week, and we're happy to learn that you're going to be the beneficiaries of this event, and I personally look forward to it, and I'm going to try to remain as neutral as possible. So maybe I should be more of a referee rather than an MC with all the people you've mentioned. Our dear multidisciplinary minister with finance, transport, and all the question of infrastructure. So thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your patience tonight. Council will work very hard to support your association by setting up a program that will fill the room at the community college. So we're expecting to sell 300 tickets minimum. Thank you very much. Question, Mr. Godet, comment. Thank you, Mr. Bertrand. I want to recognize your perseverance in the promotion of literacy and adult learning. Specifically, you started day before yesterday? Day before yesterday?
Un petit peu plus jeune.
Yeah, when he was a little bit younger. Yeah, I've been involved 20 years in literacy. Yes, that is what I wanted to recognize. It's your perseverance in the promotion of this very important element for our community, which is a little bit wobbly. Sorry, what was that? What did I miss? Nothing at all. How many classes are there in Dieppe? One class. One only? And it's full? Yeah, it's completely full. Over the year, we have 140 to 190 learners in all our classes. The reason why the figure fluctuates is because people come to class sometimes for 3 months, others for 6 months, others for a year. Sometimes it's for 3 or 4 years. So there's a lot of variety. The objective is to obtain the GED. If you had, for example, for a friendly price, the use of the Seniors Club house in Dover, would that be something, would that be a site appropriate for you? Yeah, it could, if the local is adequate for that type of activity. If a bus can go there, because the learners, generally speaking, go to classes by bus. Some of them don't have cars, so it could be a site that might be interesting for us.
Le club d'âge d'or existe.
It's a school, yeah, because the Seniors Club is still standing. It still exists. Yeah, it would be a good idea to look at it. So, do you need space that would be used only by those learners? Yeah, it wouldn't be right for us if it were being used for other things, because we have computers, we have boards, we have tables. We've been through that type of experience where there were more than one activity and it didn't function properly. So I guess that's why I couldn't work at the Rotary Pavilions, or at least it wouldn't be easy. We tried the same thing quite a few years ago elsewhere, and then it didn't work because the following morning is a different activity, so they move the tables around, they move the boards. Today with computers, it's a little more delicate. And the service for the learners, that's something on a daily basis. Yeah, they start 9:15 in the morning and they go to 3 in the afternoon. Okay, thank you, Bertrand, and good luck. Long life to the learners. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your invitation, and we'll look into it. Last item, priorities. Advisory Committee on Equal Opportunity between Women and Men. Mr. Thibodeau, you go to the podium.
Vous avez 10 minutes.
Bonsoir tout le monde.
Good evening, everyone, councillors. I'm happy to present the priorities and objectives. And, oh yes, you yourself, your worship, yes, good evening. So I'm happy to present the priorities and objectives that the Advisory Committee on Equal Opportunity between Women and Men. These priorities, once established, are living things, so they change on a regular basis. basis. But tonight, we've established 5 pillars, one on governance, one for employers, one for the economic development, one for services, and one on the snapshot of the municipality. And of those, there are different items with these pillars, but today we'll just be going through the 5 pillars, or these 5 axes. Now, concerning other items or activities that were part of the plan, there's a table at the end of the presentation that will give you an idea of all these other activities. So, as an employer, priority number 1 would be to conclude by April 2015 the study on wage equity and the presentation of the results of the report. So, we'd like the presentation to be given to committee and then to the public to have an idea of the priorities that would have been established. Priority number 2, governance, would be to encourage by May 2016 the man-woman parity at municipal levels by counting on the mentoring program of the Association of Francophone Municipalities of Unimality and the Francophone, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, with the objective of a minimum of 30% of women elected to municipal council in Dieppe. In other words, the minimum number of 3. Priority number 3, follow by December 2015 follow up on the analysis of the differences in order to know the needs in use of services of public transport for men and for women. Snapshot of the municipality. We want to promote partnerships to celebrate the Day of Women and Equality of Chances. This would be a partnership with CAFI. It's an activity of the 27th of March in Dieppe, so we established a partnership with them. We thought of doing an activity on our own, but we realized that it meant a lot of organization, and this group, CAFI, came to see us to establish a partnership with us. So we said, yes, okay, let's do it together. So we'll be there for the 27th. Unfortunately, I won't be there, but fortunately for me, I'll be in the Caribbean. And finally, priority number 6 is the economic development. Established by March 2016, a recognition award for business women, specifically in Dieppe, and we want to do this in partnership with Expansion Dieppe. I think discussions have been started already, Madame Dallaire, when she was chair, and this will be continued to in order to be able to give the award. So those are the priorities that were established. Are there any questions? I'm ready to answer. Questions from members of council?
Dernière chance.
Madame Dallaire, est-ce qu'il y a des choses que j'ai oubliées ou...
Last chance. Madame Dallaire, is there something that I might have forgotten? So no lights being turned on. I'm going to say, everyone, have a good evening. Thank you for your presentation. In the future, as it was suggested, I believe that there will be reports from different advisory councils to council. So it's a good first. Thank you very much. Good evening.